Hey everyone, welcome back to the Vintage Ballers podcast. I'm your host, Brad Coreno, and on today's episode, we have Ryan Hollins joining the show. Ryan played basketball at UCLA before being drafted by the Charlotte Bobcats in 2006 and playing 10 years in the NBA, including for the Lob City Clippers. He is currently a commentator for the Houston Rockets. So without further ado, please welcome Ryan Hollins. So I want to thank you thank you for coming on the podcast. Obviously, I met you down at Top 100, and so I followed your career for many years, Ryan, back to your UCLA days, and obviously you were on a pretty special team in '06, and we'll go back to those days in a little bit, but I wanted to start it by taking to your childhood and growing up in Pasadena. When did you fall in love with the game of basketball, and who were your influences back then?
It was crazy. It was the Houston Rockets, Hakeem
Really?
Olajuwon. It was that series with him and Shaq, and those were my first memories of like, okay, you recognize people first. You don't fall in love with the game; you fall in love with the personalities. In Hakeem's footwork, that championship team, they went back to back. It just drove memories in me, and I said, as a taller kid, I knew I was going to be tall. It was like that's something I want to do. So those were some of my funnest memories. And then the '95 championship for UCLA, I was like, I'm gonna be a Bruin. Now, how I got there, it's unbeknownst to me still. But those were the driving forces that kind of got me playing ball, buying in, and saying like, "Hey, like that's something that I want to do. I want to be a part of."
All right, man. I got to tell you, it's funny you say those two teams. That's my brother was a very good basketball player back in the early '90s, and he got recruited by a lot of the Big Ten schools. Larinaga, who was at Bowling Green at the time. This is back in '91, so he was a leading scorer of the city of Cleveland. So I grew up around the game of basketball, loved it. Diehard Cleveland fan because I'm a Cavs, grew up in Cleveland, so Cavs fan, and obviously I knew you played for us for a couple of years. But Dream is my favorite all-time athlete. I love Dream, same as you. Grew up watching him. The footwork, everything else. Like he was just unlike anything I've ever seen. Obviously, MJ, and you had all the other great players in that era, but Dream was just different to me, man. Like I never seen anything like it. I've had several of his teammates in the podcast who played in those Rockets teams, and they were telling me they just never seen anything like him. Even to this day, he was just unbelievable. And I think what made him so special is that he was as good defensively as he was offensively. And he had, I think he,
Yes,
I mean, Ryan, I think he retired in the top 10 in steals in NBA history when he retired, which is insane for a
unbelievable.
7 footer. So, and you played that position, you know how hard what that's like, and to be someone who can laterally move like he could, defend guards. I mean, he blocked John Starks at the end of Game 7 in '94 to win that series. So again, that team, I'm much like you, was a huge part of my childhood. And then of course you mentioned the '95 Bruins, Cameron Dollar. I mean, all those Toby Bailey, all those
Man.
boys. Like I grew up with that team. I was like 12, probably 12, 11 years old then. And I remember watching that run, and I love that team. I mean, the O'Bannon brothers, like, was it George Zedek was the center? I think I
Yep,
can't. Yeah, all those
yep.
guys. I remember a whole team like it was yesterday. So Tyus Edney, and that was a classic Bruins team. And for me, that'll always be my favorite Bruins team. But it was just that era of basketball to me. And obviously, I run the '90s NBA, but that whole era, especially that UCLA and Rockets team, which is funny you mentioned both of them, had a big impact on my life as well. So it's cool that you saw the same things. And I was going to take you when you were younger. Did you always want to play for UCLA, or was that particularly or a particular Final Four run that did it for you?
Now the crazy thing was, like I mapped my life out. Like I was gonna go to John Muir High School, start varsity, go to UCLA, then I was going to the NBA, and I got there by the skin of my teeth, because I signed with St. Louis originally. Hey, I was on JV, as a sophomore, and even as a junior, I didn't start. Not a lot of Division I guys that play 1 year, starting on varsity and get to that level. So, man, I was extremely fortunate. I was, but crazy enough, my crazy plan worked out.
I mean, that's incredible. And like, who did you model your game, after as a young kid?
I mean, Shaq and Hakeem, obviously, those were the guys I was trying to be in the backyard. Um, More realistically, Kevin Garnett. I looked up to him and Tim Duncan, the way they played. Those were two of the prototype power forwards, but Kevin Garnett more so stood out to me for the things that I could do on the court because of his athleticism, his size. He could guard different positions. His his energy. I didn't quite get there. I was a little more of a Dan Gedzuric at the end of the day, man. But I love me some Danny G, man.
Oh
So
yeah.
those are the guys that like I definitely looked up to, or I saw, saw in myself or something. That's what I wanted to do or become.
Because I mean, at your size, obviously, and back then, the big men has changed over time, as you know, and now it's so different than it was 30 years ago. But back then, I feel like, you know, the prototypical big man was more of a back against, back to the rim type of big man, and it wasn't really there wasn't a lot of outside shooting, so it was just very different back then. It evolved over time, and even now, I wanted to ask you this question too. It seems like some of the teams are kind of going back. Like I'm in Cleveland, so we have Mobley and Allen. Some of the teams are going back to the two bigs now instead of the small ball we've seen for the last 10 years or so. It seems like some teams are kind of slow, even Gordon and Joker in Denver, and you have the two bigs in Minnesota. And what do you see some teams seeing that and thinking, we can win with these two bigs, even if both can't shoot very well? What do you think about that? Because it seems like there was
Well,
so much small ball for years.
our last MVPs were big, Embiid and Jokic, and the Nuggets won a championship last year. So what's happening is the big guys are becoming more skilled because in the last 2 minutes of a ball game, when you need a bucket, you can double team the post and recover. So you got to work from the wings. So one thing you see from Jokic and Embiid, they catch the ball on the elbow, top of the key, and they're able to get by you or knock down a deep 3-point shot. So the skill set of the bigs is the thing that's catching up, and that's where teams are just getting bigger and bigger. And without Steph Curry and the dominance of the Warriors, there's a lot more rebounds to be had. Those guys didn't miss shots, they didn't miss threes. So size is really winning out. You look at Cleveland, as you noted. Orlando is really huge, top to bottom. The Nuggets, as well as they played, they're huge, man. They got a 6'10" small forward. Anthony Edwards plays like he's 7 feet when he attacks the rim. So size is definitely coming back into today's NBA. And when a lot of the NBA zigged, those teams that went big and zagged, they ended up making it into the playoffs, because they were able to play with that size and it wasn't just speed and 3-point shooting. So again, remember, the league is trending away from it because these big guys are getting about a decade worth. We're seeing a decade's worth of Golden State was probably about a decade or so ago, right? So now what's trending is those big guys are getting guard skills, and now it's their time in the NBA. So we're seeing more and more of them. It's
That is
not such a
interesting.
shock.
That is very interesting. And what about the European influence? We've seen obviously Luca and Jokic and all these different guys coming over and almost fairly right away playing pretty well.
They know the game. They know how to make the reads. They're drilled. When you play overseas and you have a weakness per se, let's say it's a left hand, they will over exaggerate you to your left hand. Whereas an American born player, I'm good enough, whether you're left or right hand, I can guard you and just play you straight. They have to send you to your left hand. If you can't shoot, oh, they're going to disrespect your shot. So, those guys are drilled not to have weaknesses in their game. They're drilled to be able to go equally left and right and shoot and drive. And that's where a lot of the success is coming. But the American basketball, because of the 3-point shooting, because of the Warriors' influence, is making a big leap. Shout out to the '90s here, right? We go and watch '90s basketball. The spacing was horrible. It was a lot of one-on-one,
Yep.
and now you can't do that as much today because the shooting and the scoring is better. And it's funny when they talk about the GOAT debates and things like that. You got to understand, Michael would be Michael in any era. Kobe would be Kobe in any era. But what happens is when we pair the teams up, it's the role players. So now, if I'm gonna, no disrespect, if you're gonna ask, Derek Fisher or Ron Harper to go and score 30 points a game, that guy wasn't in that role at that stage in his career. Where now, the scoring is so inflated in today's NBA. Your third option can go get you 30, almost 40 points
Easily.
in
Yep.
today's NBA. So, right, that's the biggest difference that we see in eras and generations where that guy was getting you 8 to 10 points back in the day. Hard defense, rebounds, the pace was much slower. And it was more so can you rebound and defend rather than can you shoot and run.
Ryan, what do you think? These are all such interesting points. What do you think of the debate about Shaq and Kobe Lakers against the Warrior, the Durant Warriors, and some people think they'd have no chance. Some people think they would dominate. What is your take on a team like the Shaq and Kobe Warriors? They had some outside shooters, Ori and Fisher, but they didn't have an abundance of it. And of course, Kobe was more of a mid-range shooter than he was a three-point shooter. And Shaq was so dominant, but would he have made, would he have in this era, what would he have looked like? Because I'm sure they would have followed him a lot. But what's your take on that?
Man, I was speaking about this earlier at the gym with somebody, and what people don't realize is Phil went to Shaq and told him to get heavy, get as strong as he could be. He put on massive amounts of weight, and Shaq has wiggle. Shaq could run. Shaq was quick. He could get up and down the floor. If he got a rebound, he was agile enough to go push it and not get ripped. And in today's era, you would have seen Shaq more nimble on his feet. He wouldn't have put the weight on. They just said he's strong enough. He probably doesn't need to lift the weight. And I'm not. I doubt the 3 point shot would be there. Shaq broke the wrist. I don't think that would have been there. But as far as his ball handling, running DHOs from the top of the key, turning the corner, he'd be unguardable because he could handle the basketball. But think about today, back in the day. Here's the thing: you see Shaq dribble a basketball outside the paint, you're going, man, what are you doing? Grab the ball, blow the whistle, stop practice. I'm sure he drove coach crazy every time he pushed the ball on the break and end up, running things. But it's like, well, what can you say? But today, that would have been encouraged. Shaq loved to pass. He had a lot in his game that he felt like he didn't get to, kind of be himself and as dominant as he is, because it's tough, when you're the biggest, tallest guy on the floor. They're like, dribble for what? Shoot a jumper for what? Go dunk the basketball. And he could do that, but he probably would have been even more dominant if he was able to just be free and be himself.
Yeah, that's fascinating. You're right, because he did put on a ton of weight. I mean, I think you look like he was 370, 380, not 300. He was
Easy,
massive, massive. I mean,
easy.
I've never seen anything like him before, and that especially in his Laker run in the early 2000s. So I think when you look at the Warriors, and I think it's also the rules too. I've heard some of the former players told me it depends what rules you're playing with as well, because some of the rules are different. The hand checking, and nowadays I think can you elbow? I think when you go around a pick or someone was telling me you can do something you couldn't do before, and all these different rules that play a factor as well. So really, some of the guys will tell me it depends. Are you playing with 80s, 90s rules, or are you playing with modern rules? Because that'll make some a different who you put in the lineup. But what do you think about that?
Great players adapt.
Mhm.
LeBron is uh, 6'8", 270, 280 with a handle. So he'd adapted to some hand checking, or if you got physical, he would have just took you for a ride down in the paint. Now, would his body probably last with all those hits? Maybe not. That would have been tough, but he could step back and shoot. But the great players adapt. Make no mistake, they find a way. And even if you look at the game from when LeBron came in the league where it was then to now, his 3 point shooting has increased. He's developed a post game. He's slowed his game all the way down. So he's had to adapt, through generations. So Michael absolutely would be taking 3 point shots. Kobe would have had a little more lift on his shot. He'd probably be running more pick and roll in today's NBA rather than pinch post and elbow ISO. So those guys can play between generations. Hey, Larry Bird would have been starting point guard, right?
I
You're gonna
was
put the ball in your best player's hands.
just gonna mention him. He would be perfect for today's era. The way he could shoot, the way he could pass, with his IQ, like everything about what he did. I had Michael Cooper on the show, and Cooper's always he always said he goes, Larry couldn't jump over a pop can, but yet he would fake you out. He would he would tell you what he's going to do to you, and he would do it. He was so methodical that way. So guys like him, and you even guys like Dominique back then. People forget about how great Dominique was, and some of those guys back in the 80s and 90s were just incredible athletes. And not Larry, but I mean Dominique and MJ and all those Isaiah. I feel like, and like you said, LeBron could play in any era. I have no doubt about that. I watched him grow up in Cleveland, and the people who think he wouldn't have lasted, like you said, he would have. I mean, he's 270, 280, he's a beast. He can handle, he can pass, he has great vision. He has one of the highest IQs probably of all time in NBA history. There's no question he would last in any era. I don't know. A lot of the haters, I think, with LeBron, they have their own reasons, but I mean, to me, it's ridiculous. I think he wouldn't be a great player in any era. Just I think you could take a lot of those all-time Olajuwon, those kind of guys, they're going to be great in any era. Kobe. So I completely agree with you on that. And I find it funny how some people are so staunch on who they think could play in what era, but a great player is a great player to me. And whether it's the 60s, 80s, or 2010s, it doesn't really matter.
And obviously, you say the Pistons were going to beat the crap out of you. New York, Miami, those matchups were tough, but the rest of the NBA, I mean, the talent just wasn't there. The talent level of the league has risen dramatically. No disrespect. So there are a couple guys that couldn't have a chance to hold LeBron James just by his speed alone. They they would have been running in quicksand, man. The athleticism, the speed of the game, it's just it's honestly it's off the charts.
My buddy Corey played with LeBron in high school, starting shooting guard for that team. And he was telling me he was LeBron ruined high school basketball for him. He goes, every time I hear about a great high school basketball player now and I watch him, he goes, it's not even comparable. He goes, there's a lot of great players out there. A lot of these kids are great players, but LeBron was so different at that age. And remember, he was anointed at 16 years old, and he took that pressure on, and I would say he surpassed almost everything that we thought he could be. So to have that kind of pressure at 16, 17, 18, and we saw him grow up, 45 minutes from here. And my brother saw him in an open gym, Ryan, when I think he was 14 or 15, before he was the chosen one. And one of his, it was a guy named Bob Watson running a gym up here. And he said, Brett, you got to come see this kid from Akron named LeBron James. And I'll never forget my brother telling me, and I was probably 16 then. He goes, "This kid is going to be the next Jordan." And I'm thinking, come on, like really, we hear that kind of stuff all the time. Thinking there's no way he's going to be even close. Well, he might. I don't, we can debate whether he was Jordan, but he was darn good. And I've never seen anything like that. And I remember telling all my buddies back then in high school that this kid's going to be the next Jordan, blah blah blah. And after he won the championship in 16, he came back and we won in Cleveland. I had probably 5 or 6 of my friends in high school say, "Man, I never forget the day you told me that this kid's going to be." And sure enough, he was that. So I have, when it's funny because I run that 90s page and I'm a diehard 90s fan, love the era, but I don't run that page to disparage the current era or the older eras and that. I run it just to celebrate that era because that was my childhood, like you with Akeem and everything. That was just what
For
I grew up
sure.
watching. But I don't, we do, some of the guys who follow that page, some of my fans or so the fans of the page are totally cool when it comes to different eras. Other ones are very pro 90s, anti everything else. So it's kind of funny seeing all that. But I always tell some of the guys who DM me, I said, look, you might not like LeBron personally for whatever reasons, or you might not like some of the newer players. These guys are incredible. I mean, Steph Curry, I mean, the guy changed the game. How many, at every level now, they're shooting 3-pointers because of Steph and Clay. So, I mean, and Steph, I've never seen anything like that before. When he would pull up those 35 footers, that OKC game about 8, 9 years ago, when they're leading the whole game up until the end, he hits that, 30-footer. I've never seen anything like that in a game before. He revolutionized the game. So whether you don't like these guys or not, to me is irrelevant because you're overlooking what's obvious, and that's their talent level, and just what they brought to the table. They changed the game, to me for the better, just because I feel, now shooting is like you said, bigs can shoot now, 7-footers can shoot threes now. I mean, pretty well. So if you're not, I mean, you got guys, got power forwards like Keegan Murray, all these kind of guys who can shoot. You didn't have that as much back 30, 40 years ago. I mean, you had a couple guys, but that was very rare to have a 6'10", 6'11" power forward chucking up threes and doing it at 40%. So again, I'm with you 100% on all the mixed match of errors. I think a great player or and certainly like a great role player like Robert Ory, for example, could play in any era. He could shoot. He's a good
Yes.
defender. He was smart. Guys like that, can play in any era. Just like guys, whether it's Draymond or any of the guys nowadays who are these, kind of like 2 or 3 dimensional guys who can do multiple things. They can play in any era because they know how to play the game. It's just I don't understand the hatred with some that people have for different eras. I never understood that.
Well, Dream, that team could have played easily in today's era. I don't think the triangle offense would work in today's era. It was too easy to guard, too much one-on-one, even with the cuts. But, Rudy T was so far ahead because they spaced you out. They had none but shooters, and you had Hakeem. Now, the only difference Hakeem would be probably rim running, setting picks and going, or having the ball at the top of the key with the spacing and going and making a play. But that team was built for today's NBA. They were light years ahead of the league at that time.
That's a great point. And you had Cassell. I mean, it was one of the guys I had in the podcast was Pete Chilcutt, who is a power forward who came off the bench. He was a good shooter. He was actually one of the first like power forwards who can shoot the ball. And you had Pete. You obviously had Glide, but you had guys like Mario Ellie and all these 3-point shoot Ori, and Vernon Maxwell, Kenny Smith. They all could shoot. So you
Yep.
have a guy like Dream underneath, and you had the '94 team at Otis Thorpe, who was a banger. Then you had all these shooters around them. Like you said, that was really more of a 2015, 2017, 18 type team than it was a 94, 95 team. So I agree 100% with you. There was a very different type of team. And I always wonder what would have happened if Jordan never retired. People say that Jordan would have won 8 straight. I mean, I don't know. I don't ever underestimate what MJ could have done, but it seems 8 straight to me. That's a lot. And would there be injuries where they've got worn out by the end? Because he was worn out by the second three-peat by the 6th championship. He was exhausted. So whether they would have beaten the Rockets or not, we'll never know. But I thought that would have been a fascinating series to see it prime Dream and that team around him with the Bulls, Pip and MJ Bulls. That would have been fascinating.
Yeah, that man, they would have had problems. Rodman would have had to pull out every single stop. Um, I think that for Dream, he'd be absolutely unguardable. Um, I don't know if they had the bodies to throw at Michael. You know, Vern was on that first championship. He'd have fought and been physical. Those two had those, storied matchups. Mario Ellie, those were the 3 and D guys. They were also ahead of their time. So it would have been a match, man. It's something that debate will probably go on, but from a spacing standpoint, man, they were impossible to guard because Dream was gonna make the right play every time. He was gonna trust his guys down the clutch, and Michael would have had to put on a show, man. Mike and Scotty, that would have been a fun one to watch, honestly.
Oh, that would have been one of the greatest finals ever, in my opinion, if that would have happened. And just because of Dream and Jordan alone, not to mention all the other great players in that series. So I totally agree with you. And then Rudy T and Phil, and it would have been fascinating to watch that. And one more thing about Dream, I always tell people is that think of the centers he beat in playoff series. He beat Kareem in '86. He beat David Robinson, who was the MVP that year. He beat Ewing and then Shaq in the finals. I mean, he beat four of the greatest centers of all time in a series, and it's unbelievable. I don't know many centers who've done something like that.
No, and it's so hard to work out of the post too. That's what's so unbelievable. So imagine Dream catching the ball in a short roll where he just takes one dribble and he's into his hook, or you know, catching and spinning off a guy immediately. The help wouldn't be there, or you wouldn't have the size. Sometimes it's that secondary power forward. You get by your man, and the other guy's back there. And now today's era, you don't have that big power forward, that's sitting
Yep.
back there, looking to help. So man, it would have been definitely, fun seeing that team now, or seeing, Michael not retiring, and seeing, how do you guard Dream? Because, I don't think he would have been phased by Rodman's antics. I think he would have played through it. That Dream was so centered. He wasn't the Dream that was going to turn and clock you. He was centered and just would have kept playing basketball. And, Mario Ali would have been mixing it up with Rodman, or getting in his face, man. So or Robert Ory would have been, holding fort, man. So it just fun things we can throw out and imagine.
Yeah, that would have been a I would have loved to seen that series. And that I think about that one a lot because I think that would have been one of the more interesting series in NBA history if it would have happened. So now I want to go back to your UCLA days, and before I think Coach Lavin was there your first year, wasn't he?
Yes.
Okay, and
Yep.
when you were recruited there, did you see? Because obviously by your senior year you became a national championship team, but what before you got that you made that run to the championship game? Take us through those years. I think you had a couple rough years the first couple years, and then of course Coach Holland came on board, and then everything kind of changed. But take it from day one to that run against Florida in the '06 championship game. What was it like, and what was your experience like at UCLA in general?
Man. For one, I came in, we were ranked top 10 in the country. It was Capone's senior year, Ray Young, and we ended up being one of the worst teams in UCLA history. We lost 10 straight. I think the record was still there. I wasn't playing. I wasn't really slotted to play. Later on in the year, I got an opportunity, and they threw me out there, and I played well as a freshman. It really turned some heads, and it's crazy. I got on the NBA draft radars, and people were seeing me. I played under 19 basketball, and things were looking up. But when Lavin was fired, Allen didn't recruit me. So me and him, we had a bumpy relationship. He liked guys with footwork, guys that were smart. They played the angles, and all I want to do is kind of run and dunk, or kind of get up and down, more of a pro style basketball game. But you know, even though me and Ben bumped heads, and the team progressively got better, I learned the positioning of the game, taking charges, setting good screens, those things. So it became more of a hybrid of, his kind of slow it down Big East basketball. But because we were athletes, we were still able to get up and down. We were able to defend. The athleticism really took into play. I'll be honest, man. My college experience was miserable at UCLA. Basketball wasn't going well for me, and when basketball is not going well at that stage in your life, your life's not going well. Your life is ball is life, right? That was a real thing for me. So by the time I got to pay dividends of winning in college basketball, that was my senior year. Um, I was gone to the NBA draft right there. I couldn't even come back and party and celebrate it. But I always like to think of it like this. Um, my dad always taught me leave your place better than it was, before you got there. And I came in with the worst team, one of the worst teams in UCLA history, and I left with the most wins in UCLA history.
Wow.
So we made it to the championship game. The next two Final Fours, they lost in the Final Four. And, in those wooden days, they didn't play as many games as we played. So my team has the most wins in UCLA history. So
Never knew that.
I'm
Wow.
proud of that. Yeah, I'm
That's
proud of
incredible.
that. That was cool stuff. And kind of had to grow up with Ben and go through the fire and see that it wasn't about me. Check my ego out the door and find a way, because that senior year I knew was make or break. I had learned that um if I didn't work hard, put my ego aside, and just go win basketball games by any means necessary, I wasn't going to have a chance to go pro. So I knew that was it. And we had enough on the team. We played hard. I did my job, and we got where we needed to go. I knew I had something special inside me, but I realized I couldn't do it without the coach. It wasn't about whether he liked me or not, whether how cool we were. I just did my job, and I didn't want to lose. So I did my job, and I made sure, hey, whatever the heck I have to do so that we can win these games. If I got to get a rebound, I got to block. I played to win. I didn't just play for me. I truly played winning basketball, and we ended up making a run that year. And we had some talented guys, but I knew I was going to do anything I could. I needed my teammates, and we end up winning. A lot of people don't know. Also, I was young. I came into school at 17, started high school, probably 13 or so,
Wow.
graduated at 21, 20, turning to 21. Luke Bamute and me were the same age. He was a freshman, I was a senior. So,
Wow.
I was young. I grew an inch in college. I was still physically, developing at that stage. And then, it's a reset too when your coach is fired. So, there wasn't that grace and lenience like, hey, I want Ryan to do well. He's like, I'm bringing in my guys to kind of make things happen, you know at the end of the day. So I'm grateful for it, because if you can't find adversity in your life, especially when you're young, and kind of make it through, you end up in that same kind of like in a funk, man. Excuses for yourself, quitting. You know what? Being enabled. Nobody enabled me, man. So I had to figure it out, and it was rough, dude. It was tough. Like the thing is, for me, this last thing I'll say, like, I love basketball. Like, I love it. Like, if you don't love something, you won't cry over it. Like, I cry over basketball. And that means I love it. If you love your cat, your dog, you cry over it. Your son having you cry because you love it. Your kids, obviously. I love the game of basketball. So, that was it was a big awakening. And I knew I had much more in me. And I knew, I get to the NBA, get a shot. I'm going to rip and run and kind of show what I got, and I was blessed to be able to do all of it, honestly, at the end of the day.
Wow. I never knew that you had that experience at UCLA. So when you look back now, I mean, you were talking about being kind of grateful for it. Do you think that you would have had that 10-year NBA career if it wasn't for some of the hardships in college?
It's a good question, because if I had went with Lorenzo Romar, probably would have developed my game, could have been maybe a top 10 pick. People going like, this dude didn't start for 4 years or off and on for 4 years. Why did we draft him? Uh, Defensively probably would have been there. But I played. It was like, dude, I had to fight, and a lot of collegiate athletes said, when you fight against your teammates because they're trying to shine, and you fight against your coaching staff because you got to fit into what they do, or you're not that guy, man. Before you even play the opponent, you didn't gone against opponents in your own camp. You know what I'm saying? So maybe that adversity made me tough. Maybe if I had went somewhere and got the developing and got an opportunity, I just would have got better and better. And who knows where the sky would have been the limit. At the end of the day. So I don't know.
I, I,
I don't know.
I mean, that's a great question because I mean, who knows? I mean, you're right. From a development standpoint, it might have been different if you had, someone who would have developed you in a different way. But I'm thinking from like a mental standpoint, maybe like a perseverance standpoint. I would think that rough experience probably gave you, like when you got to the NBA, you already kind of went through some some shit, so to speak. You kind of knew how to deal
Oh
with it,
yeah.
so like you were already prepared to to deal with some of the ups and downs of the NBA. And I know that, I mean, to stay in the NBA for 10 years, not many people ever get to say they did that. So, even some of the great players don't even play for that long. So that's what I'm saying. You lasted for a long time, and I remember your career very well. Like, I remember you at the Bobcats. I remember you on the Lob City Clippers. Obviously, you were at Cleveland for a while. My hometown for a couple of years, because I actually want to bring up a game that we always love here in Cleveland in a little bit. But so I remember, and I think you probably know which one it is. But
Know which one it is.
though, I think about that. When I watched you in college, it's funny because I had no clue. I mean, no one would know this, but it just seemed like you got, you think of a bunch of college kids having fun, having a good time, everything's hunky dory, you're going to the Final Four, having no idea that what someone like you was struggling with at the time, trying to just fit in and trying to make your way, and your dream to make it to the league. So yeah, that's very fascinating to hear all that, and who knows what would have happened, if it went a different route. But you did have, a 10-year career. I mean, you got to look back now and be pretty proud of what you did.
Yeah, nah, man, I am. It's crazy. I was blessed to have that long of a career. It takes a while before you can look back and celebrate it. Took a while before I could look back and celebrate the things that I did. And, I was always taught humility, but kind of talking to my son and talking to my kids about those experiences and see if they understand it or they get it. So it takes a while, man. Like, you don't have the time because, like, again, you go straight. You don't know how competitive the NBA is. And when you have the right mindset, you go straight from the NBA, from college basketball, right? The championship, right? Whatever. Boom, right in the draft workouts. Right from the draft, boom, you're a rookie. Every year, somebody's trying to take your job. If you blink, it's a wrap. So every summer for me wasn't sitting back and chilling. I was in the gym doing 2 a days, 3 a days, literally 3 a days. You know what I'm saying? But I had that type of, I could do it. I was that type of athlete. But you got to stay hungry, never come into camp out of shape, always work, add something to your game. Make sure, after the game, someone's buzzing about what you're doing. Somebody should be excited about you, you know, and continue to grow at the game. But it was a lot. It's a lot that I've been through. But the competitive nature or looking back and celebrate, you can't. You can't. You can't. You can't even blink, dude. It was like 2, 3 years ago until I actually watched the national championship where we lost. I never watched the game.
Wow,
I never watched the game, bro. Never watched the game, Brad.
that had to be rough. I mean, you think about it, you put all you see,
I couldn't stomach it. I couldn't
yeah,
stomach it. No, I don't want to see that. Couldn't stomach it. But now you appreciate it. On this side in broadcasting, my competitive juices are gone. Like Brad, imagine every time you go around, you see your coworker, and you're like competing, dude. You can't look at the game through a normal lens. It's like I'm better than him. He ain't this. I gotta go put in work. I'm better. Like you're competing. Like it takes a while for those juices to come out of your system. It's
yeah.
a thing. Some people never lose it. It's competitive, man. It's cutthroat. Every single day you're thinking about somebody who got your spot, bro, and you don't like them for it. You ain't friends.
That's yeah. This is the stuff that I love hearing about. Because I mean, if you, no one, so few people ever play in the NBA. So in any professional sport, especially the NBA, it is one of the toughest leagues in all of the world to get into. And you did it for 10 years, and to hear the stories behind that, that's why I love talking to someone like you. And like a lot of the guys I've had on the podcast, I feel a lot of them kind of fought for what they had. It wasn't, I had some stars on, but a lot of the guys had to fought, they went overseas for a period of years, came back, and it gives them a different perspective on what they have at that point. And I feel like the mental aspects of everything, and again, I would never know this, never played in the league, but just from all the guys tell me this, the mental aspects are the ones you really have to overcome, because physically you guys all have the talent. Obviously you're huge, you're athletic, but it's
100%.
that mental part of it. And I think it seems like a lot of people eventually can't handle it because it's just there's so much on your plate at that time. I mean, all the things going on as an NBA player, and there's only 400 of you, 400 of you in the whole world. So that you're in a very exclusive club and have to handle that pressure. And like you said, people are fighting for those roles every year. The rookies and some of the guys coming overseas and all the undrafted guys and constantly trying to take your spot. So that I can't imagine what that's like every summer, not knowing if you're going to have a spot in the league and working your ass off to get back.
Yeah, man. For me, it was driven by fear. People understand that. Like once you think you're good, you're not good. You're done. So like I was driven by fear of being out the league, not being able to provide. Being the guy. not playing anymore, I was driven by fear to go out and work and grind. You weren't going to catch me slipping. I was going to always outwork you, but that fear drives you. And I've seen a lot of guys that are much better than me that once they thought they were good, it was cooked. And even kind of if I thought I was good for a second, I was trash, and I had to kind of work to kind of get back to where I was. And then, if you're going to play for that long, you got to redefine yourself. You got to show and prove. There's a lot of things you got to come to the table with, and it's not just about being 7 feet tall. I was fortunate because of what my job was, but I had to go and get it and had to go work, and show up every day. So, that fear again drives you. A lot of people don't understand this. And I saw this on a Huberman podcast, but you
Yep.
know, if you see just essentially when you see somebody at the gym with all these muscles, right? All these muscles or whatever, someone ripped, somebody in shape, you're looking at that fat guy or fat girl. They don't want to be fat no more, right? Or the skinny guy, skinny girl don't want to be skinny no more. So I was the guy who was cut as a freshman in high school, the guy who was under recruited, who don't want to be under recruited, don't want to be cut no more. And that fear drove me to what I was. And we think about in our lives the things that we stick with. We have it's not just the things we love, but it's the fear. So in tune, no disrespect when I say this, a guy like Zion, it will always be tough for him because he rolls out of bed and he's the most talented man on the floor, just about in every single game he steps into. So why would he have to work as hard as somebody who don't have it? That's why you got to applaud LeBron James because and applaud Michael Jordan because that shadow of Jordan, LeBron went after that thing. You know what I'm saying? And that's the only thing that he could draw and drive and chase. Because the dude could have stopped playing 10 years ago,
Yep.
could have stopped playing 5 years ago, right? After they run the championship, if
Oh,
LeBron said this is it and this is for the people, we'd have been happy.
first ballot Hall of Famer. No questions asked. 6 years ago,
Fear.
7 years ago, easily.
I don't know what's driving LeBron. I don't know. I'm still wondering, right? But that fear is it. And that's just me and my little, role player backup role just to maintain. But it's mental, dude.
Did you have any vets when you first came into the league with Charlotte, that kind of pulled, or any team really that pulled you aside and kind of helped you out or gave you some talking points?
Man, I had a lot of great vets, and I hate that these young guys don't have that in today's NBA. Nazi Mohammed was a guy. Nazi told me,
Yeah.
look, you're gonna get traded away, and it's gonna be the best thing that's ever happened because they're gonna appreciate you on that other team. You know, Brevin Knight taught me how to be a pro. Melvin Eli made sure I wasn't doing anything silly. Othello Harrington used to elbow me every day in practice. Jake Bosco, took care of me and always talk good, man, was a constant pro. So I had a lot of great vets like, oh, geez, Derek Anderson
Oh, loved it.
took
Yep.
care of me. Like I had some super vets, like they ain't got those 17-year vets, in the game anymore. And those were the guys that I was privileged to get work after. So, my mindset was like, I wasn't looking at uh, you know, Tim Duncan and Shaq and those guys. I realized early on, I was like, all right, Brevin Knight's been here for like 14, 15 years. Let me watch what he's doing. So, at a worst case scenario, let me just hang around this deal. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me just be here. So like that's what it was for me. Seeing the Brevins and the Melvins and the Nazi Mohammeds. How'd you do this for so long and watching how they move? I realized I couldn't be like the other young guys. I want to see what they did because I was trying to stay.
Man, shout out to all those guys you mentioned. We drafted Brevin and Da here in Cleveland, so we love those guys, and they played on the Sean
Yep.
Kemp's, Adrunas Ilgauskas teams in the late '90s, and then of course Othello and those 96 Hoyas with Iverson. And shout out to all those guys. I mean, those are all Voskuhl and UConn. Yeah, that was you definitely name drop a lot of old school guys, a lot of OGs right there for sure.
Legends, man, and those guys, they knew their value to give back. It's different. You got a grown man in the locker room with a wife and kids at home. He moved different than that young bull hitting the club every night. You,
Yep.
you know, it's a different game.
And do you think, like, as you went on your career, and you got the Lob City, of course, eventually, and that was a very interesting team and one of the more interesting teams not to win a championship. Did looking back, were you guys good enough to win a championship, or was there something, were you missing a piece, or was it just more of a, do you was it just something that in the end it's just getting good to get it done? Like, what was the reason why? Because you guys had a ton of talent.
My opinion, there's some maturity issues, but I feel like spacing was an issue with Blake and DJ. Teams at a certain point wouldn't guard DJ. They'd zone up on Blake, to create that. But I do feel like if that team had a played, and no one's ever looking at it like this, if that team had a played through DJ and his offense developed, because there were moments where kind of he was posting up, spinning off guys, dunking, making moves, and he got really confident. I think that team wins a championship because if he's on the floor, you gotta play through him. You got to get the most out of him, and I think that it would have opened things up for Blake. Um, we were good defensively. We had just about everything, but I think that was the big deal. And Chris is so smart that when Chris don't trust you, he's gonna go get the best shot possible that he can get. And I think those two would have been able to relieve pressure from him, even more. But I think DJ just playing underneath in the dunker, he'd have had to get more touches on the block, or his offensive game would have had to kind of develop it. That would have been taking some lumps. That would have been how do you take the ball out of your all-star Blake Griffin's hands? That would have been a tough ask, because it wasn't like those two were coming into their own. It wasn't like they had played somewhere else, had success, and came there to win. They were still becoming what they needed to be at that time in the league.
I mean, that was a really interesting kind of transitional era of the NBA because it was kind of the towards the end of the Spurs dynasty. They had one more championship in 14, of course, and then the Heat. It was right in the middle of the Heatles, but you could see Wade and Bosh they're starting to have injury problems at the end there. And it was just getting a little bit, there was rumors about LeBron going back to Cleveland. So it's kind of an interesting, and then no one knew about the Warriors at that point, how good they were eventually going to be. No one knew LeBron and Love and those guys would be in Cleveland. So it was kind of a very interesting era. And I think you guys, if there could have been a year there where you guys could have won it, and that 13, 14, 15, that range somewhere. But it's a shame we never got to see what that could have been. I feel it was such an interesting team. I was living in LA actually when Chris Paul was traded there. So I went to with his first game against Kobe in the Staples Center, and it was electric. I've never seen anything like that before. It was incredible. So I remember that. I
Yeah,
think
we
that was
had
that
no.
team was
Well,
loaded.
I'll say this real quick. We were kind of the poor man's versions of the Pistons to the Warriors because we put them out the playoffs, and then they came back and it was on and
That's true. Yeah,
popping.
that's
That was
true.
that
Yep.
was it. That was it.
That's
And
did you know how good they were going to be? Did you see the Splash Brothers and see these guys are going to be all, like what did you think back then? Because no, I don't think anybody realized they're going to be all timers like that. But what was your view of them at that point?
when they lost, it was personal, dude. Like they were giving everything to us. We were just more talented. Blake was more talented. They were just young. They were just super young. But the way they competed was different. And then when Steph and Clay went and played USA basketball, they came back and they started that year. It was like, oh, this is different. So, Steph going left was lethal. But you'd always shade Steph to his right. You'd make him go right. And he didn't shoot the ball as well, and he didn't finish as well at the rim. So we looked up the next year, first plays of the game, you send Steph to his right. Sucker went right three, step back three. And it was like, ah, figured it out. They came with an energy, that swagger. They were like kind of, we know you're good. Their game went to a different level. That was when they went, but the way things ended, it was physical. We beat them up. They weren't there yet, but you could see it coming. Like Mark Jackson.
Yep.
Mark Jackson don't get enough because
Shout out to Mark for sure.
Mark gave them the mentality like war. Like he went after Blake. Like they weren't really good enough yet, but he went after Blake. He went after CP. Like he made it personal, you know. And those guys learned how to battle from Mark Jackson. And when Kerr came in, they were already fine-tuned monsters by that time. You know what I'm saying? So Kerr gets the credit, but I like Mark taught him how to go to war. Mark made it personal, and then those guys competed. He made some dogs. You know, you
Yeah,
have a little puppy, little pit bull puppy. Not that I've ever done this, not that, but you know, when they wanted to make a dog mean, they grab him by the muzzle. You know, make him mad when he's young, and when he gets older, he's an attack dog. You know, he wants to fight. So that's kind of what Mark was able to do for that young ball club.
definitely shout out to Mark. I totally agree with you. He doesn't get a lot of the credit for that. And he was there in the beginning. He saw, Stephen Clay will say this. They always say that he saw what we were before we even saw it. You know, like, that we could be what we can be. So they always shout out Mark too. And then of course once they added, Livingston and Iguodala, and then Steve Kerr came out, it was a done deal at that point. You're like, "All right, we're not going to beat these guys." Their death lineup. I mean, people forget how great Sean Livingston was as a backup point guard. I mean, he could have
Oh
started for
my
most of the teams in the
God.
NBA. Yeah, that
Oh
dude was
my God.
automatic from 10, 15 feet away, and 6'7", what 6'9", 6'8". He was lanky, and then you had Iguodala. I mean, they're all these guys. That was just a freaky lineup. And when you had Durant, especially that death lineup, how are you going to beat that? I mean, that was about as lethal as I've ever seen. That was right up there with the Kukoc, Pippen, Jordan, Harper, Bulls team of the '90s. That was a just incredible. I mean, then the shooting, we've never seen shooting like that. I don't know if we will anytime soon. With arguably two of the greatest shooters, maybe the two greatest ever, and then KD, Iguodala, and whoever Draymond, or Livingston, whoever you want to put out there, just incredible.
Best team of all time.
I mean, it's
It's
hard
the
to argue
best
that.
basketball club of all time. The
Yeah,
Bulls couldn't beat that team.
it's
People don't
hard
want
to
to hear it because they love Michael. I love Michael too. They couldn't beat that team. Couldn't beat them. Those role players couldn't beat them. That was the best basketball club of all time.
like you said before. It's the role player. We know what MJ is going to be great in any series. Steph and Clay are going to be, in their prime. They're going to be great in any series. Those role players, the Iguodalas, the Livingston, those guys, that versus the the,
Yes.
the coup coaches, and that's who would have won those matchups. That's what it's all about when it comes down to. And we'll never know. But I'll tell you what. I mean, I don't know how you guard Splash Brothers and KD alone, not to mention all the great role players, was tough enough to guard. And you add the other guys in there. People forget Iguodala was a Finals MVP. I mean, it was they were loaded. And then you still had other guys in that team, Barbosa and guy. I mean, Barbosa on the midnight or the mid 2000 Suns was a heck of a player. I mean, he was,
Yes.
they were loaded, absolutely loaded.
No, you're
So
right about that.
I want to go back to, I want to bring this game up to you. So you were here. It was 2010, 11, the Cavs, and we had lost, 20 some straight games. Cleveland was depressed. Obviously, LeBron had left. It's one of those years it was just a very depressing year as Cavs fans. But then we play the Heat that March. And I think it was, late March, and they had been on a roll for a while. They had won, tons of games, and they were on a, roll. They had won the championship, or I'm sorry, they hadn't won the championship yet, but they were on a roll that year. They're starting to get rolling. And I remember we beat them at home. And that game, I think Cavs fans still talk about that game to this day, just because it was kind of I actually talked to Mo Williams a little bit. He wasn't in that game, but he hit a game winner early that season for us. And I talked to him at camp for a little bit about it. But for Clevelanders at that time, Ryan, like, that gave us hope, because we were such passionate fans, and to have someone like LeBron leave and then pretty much be left in shambles at that point, it was tough. But you guys battling at the end of those games and then beating the Heat at home, that was enough for us to hold. We were happy the rest of the year. We didn't care if we lost every other game. Just beating them at home meant so much to us fans. I can speak for all the Cleveland fans. I've talked to hundreds of them about this. That game was huge for this franchise, because it kind of just gave us that a little bit of like, okay, we're still here. We're still relevant, even though we're not relevant within NBA circles right now. But it's still a franchise we want to pay attention to. And of course, that summer we drafted Kyrie, and then the whole thing started changing after that. But that game, I'm telling you, Ryan, that was a huge, huge thing for the city of Cleveland, because it really, we were so down at that point as Cavs fans.
Well, I'd like Cleveland to show me some love, man. I haven't heard anything. This is the most acknowledgement I've ever gotten from the game.
I
Just,
I can tell
just
you, the
from
hard
you right now, man.
the hardcore fans, all I'm telling you, I talked to a lot of hardcore Cavs fans, and that game is still something that we talk about, because it was just something that we never. Again, we going into that game, I'm thinking we're not going to win this game. Obviously, the Heat are going to kill us again. LeBron came in the first time and scored like 37 off us, whatever it was. But that was just such a momentum shift for the franchise, and just the fans, to kind of get us a little bit into it again. Like, okay, we're still relevant a little bit. And then going into that summer, I think Baron Davis was on that team too. He had traded for Baron because he came here. That's how we got Kyrie, was that pick from the Clippers. So Baron was in that game. I think Alonzo G, and there's a lot of guys that people forget about. But that, again, I don't forget about that game, and all the hardcore Cavs fans do not forget about that game. It was March of 11, I believe, somewhere in 2011.
Well, for one, we were tanking. I didn't know we were tanking. We had injuries. I don't know if Twan ended up getting hurt, but I know Andy got hurt. We had a bunch of injuries. Team decided to tank. You know, as a player, it was tough. You don't know we're tanking, but we're tanking. It's not like they come in, hey guys, we're tanking. They're just doing weird stuff in the lineup, and you don't know. You're just playing hard. But all we heard about was the game, first game against LeBron. And when he got there, everybody had an opinion of how they didn't like him, how he needed this, how he needed that. And what happened was, Brad, if you watch the game, our fans were more worried about hating LeBron than cheering for us. They didn't cheer for us that game. So it was weird. It was weird for LeBron because he tried to be this bad guy. He's not a bad guy. LeBron tried to create this Jordan moment where he's talking to the bench, and then he goes and does something, and it never felt right for anybody. And our fans didn't support us. And that's they forgot about the guys wearing this jersey. They were still worried about last year, and it wasn't fair. And we felt it, and it was just weird. And everybody wanted the game. So many people just crappy stuff, dude. Like hurt LeBron, elbow him, step on him, just kick him for me. What the heck did he ever do to you for him to be physically hard? Cheap stuff. Next game we played, Baron Davis is there. Lonzo G's going into getting paid, having a heck of a year. Anthony Parker was playing, who's a dog. JJ Hickson kind of still needed to be led. So when I stepped up, it kind of helped him fall into more of a natural role. And when I walked into the locker room, and I'm kind of ready to go, hyped up. People forget how good Baron Davis was. We start winning games down the stretch once he got there because he could throw the lob, he could score. You forget all of what he has. You oh my God, you know, you forget. You thought he didn't want to play basketball anymore. He came back and he was so in. Let me tell you something right here. Baron Davis was so into Cleveland. He loved it. He was bought in. When Daycon didn't have him in the plans, that crushed him. That crushed him. He wanted to. Baron Davis wanted to be in Cleveland. He wanted to be with Kyrie, and that one did this to BD. People don't talk about that. That did this because he wanted to be there with Kyrie. He wanted to be there, and you know you didn't know that when the trade was made, it was kind of like throw Baron away. You know we're done, and he got away from LA. It was good for him, and he was so into this new mentorship leadership role. But back to the game, when I walked in the game, Baron's in the training room. I walked in the training room, normal game, normal routine. Baron just starts laying into me. You ain't ready to play. Go back home if you don't want to be here. Who do you think you are? Just strolling in the locker room, blah, 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 this and that. And I'm like doing my normal. Baron pissed me off so bad. I was furious with him, dude. I was so mad. And like I'm an overthinker, Brad. I'm an overthinker. I think I see everything. I see too much. Sometimes it should just be basketball. And he got me from overthinking because he pissed me off so much. And I just put in my mind like my collegiate days we talked about. I was like, we're not losing this game. You know, we're not losing this game. Whatever I need to do, we're not going to lose this game because I quarterback the defense when I'm out there. I knew what everybody needed to do. I knew that Dwayne Wade was going to the hole. I was going to crack Dwayne Wade. After I cracked him, he was going to come at me because he's going to the hole to score. And when he comes at me, I'm going to turn the other way and just keep playing basketball. You know, I knew to be early with LeBron. I could feel the hesitation in some of their faces in that game. And I knew that they weren't going to give Chris the basketball once they kind of got into their moment. But we mentally, we had them. And once the crowd got behind them, we were rocking and rolling. But that was one of the most enjoyable experiences of my life. Maybe the best game I've ever played in my life, or one of the best. But I'll never forget that moment to the day I die. Brad, I'm glad you acknowledge it. You know, I would like some acknowledgement from Cleveland to some degree. Maybe I didn't do much there, but hey, that was a moment that was bigger than basketball. And the fans were with us, man, that time. So it was really cool. And people forget how good Baron Davis was. But I knew if I did my job, he was going to take care of it. And Baron physically, man, he was guarding LeBron step for step. Like he's BD when he's on, freak athlete, but he took it. But I knew I had to give our guys something. I went, hey, Brad, I wasn't going to let us lose that game. Nah, I wasn't going to let us lose that game.
I'm t- I'm telling you right now, like that after that game, I was getting texts from friends. Like that was a game that meant a lot to Cleveland. I know looking back now, there's been so much that happened to the Cavs since then. Obviously, with LeBron coming back and the championship, and now Donovan signing today. All the there's a lot of stuff that's happened. I look back at that moment, and that was the first moment since LeBron left where we finally felt good. We a little bit of hope. Like, okay, there's hope here. So we forever, the diehard Cavs fans will forever thank you for that, because that was the first time I felt a little bit of hope. Like, okay, we got a team. I mean, yeah, we might not be doing very well this year, but we just beat the Heat. We got a team, and they cared, and they went out there and played their asses off and won. And it was I remember the crowd being electric. I watched on TV. It was just, and I had friends texting me. I called my dad. I called my brother. It was awesome. I mean, that was again, that was a big game for Cleveland, and a game that, like you said, that the casuals won't remember it. The diehards do. I'm telling you, they absolutely do. So yeah, I think I personally thank you for the city of Cleveland for that, because that meant a lot to us, for
Appreciate
sure,
it, man.
man.
Appreciate
Yep.
it, man.
And I want to ask you too, just based on your entire career, give me two or three of the toughest guys you ever had to defend.
Chris Bosh gave me nightmares because he could drive you the way, physical, get you in foul trouble. And then we weren't just switching pick and rolls. I gotta had to go help on Calderon and then go recover to the dude with a live dribble and no help. Like, not only is he good, I gotta go guard that guy and come back and help. Boogie Cousins was tough. Marcus Saul would get rolling because he'd get you in foul trouble, would be physical. He's smart. If you overplayed him, he'd go back door. But yeah, Boogie was so big, and he'd get into you. So the guys that would kind of draw foul trouble on me, it was tough because I couldn't be aggressive. I like to be aggressive and send you to a where to. Even like, I played older Shaq. Not that Shaq wasn't great, but he was nice to me. He didn't want to hurt me, which also helped. And, I could kind of stay between he and the basket. But those guys that step out and pop and shoot, oh man, hey, they're a headache.
One of my good buddies is actually Kenny Thomas, who played in the league for 11, 12 years, played for New Mexico, and he was like an outside. He could have that mid range outside game too. I always tell Kenny, man, you would have been perfect for this era, because he could step out and hit
Oh
that
yeah.
15, 20 footer. And he always says, I wish I could have played in this era. But yeah, those kind of guys back then, you're right, and that was kind of the era where that we were starting to see more of that, to where it is now, where I feel like everybody can shoot now. But back then, it was kind of becoming that a little bit, pre Warriors, obviously. So yeah, that's interesting to me. And like, I think when you look back at, like, is there any players like a Duncan, for example, or any legendary players you played against, or you were kind of in awe when you faced them, like, oh my god, I'm guarding this guy?
How many? Kobe Bryant walked in the arena the first time I saw him. I'm like just gazing and watching. I'm like, oh my God, like that's Kobe right there. I remember KG just looking at him. My very first game, I want to say like preseason, first or second, we saw Shaq, white hot Shaq, Heat Shaq right off the championship, and just looking at him and going, dude is huge. So like there are a couple guys like you're pinching yourself, seeing them. Gary Payton, I'm like, is that the glove right there? Like all those guys, because you get the Sports Illustrated magazines and you cut out your favorite athletes
Yep.
and put them there. And like, one of the things I'd always do if I was on the foul line with a guy, like I'd give him his props. Like remember I think Antonio McNice I always want to see. I was like, hey man, I want to be like you growing up. I watched you a lot. I was always big on giving props to those guys. And you saw them, because those guys put in a lot of work, man. I got a lot of respect for the game. I'm gonna compete with you. I'm gonna work, but if I like what you're doing, or I grew up and watched you, I gave that respect where it was due. Tim Duncan, man. Oh my God, hey Tim is unbelievable, man. He grew the game, man. The way they won in San Antonio, the consistency there is unbelievable. What those guys are able to do. So for me, absolutely many starstruck moments.
That's awesome. And I've had several guys I had in the show say the same thing. Like, I couldn't believe that I was, Kenny always tells me when he goes, MJ was at the foul line. This was in Kenny's like second or third year in the league. And MJ was playing for the Wizards. And he's like, I asked MJ for his shoes that, like, can I get your shoes out of the game? And he just looked at me and smiled with that MJ smile. And he goes, I'll never forget that. Like, I'm talking to Michael Jordan right now. I couldn't believe it. So it's cool to have, I mean, playing against those OGs and the guys like Duncan. I mean, these guys are legends. I mean, heck, you got the big glove, and I mean, it's incredible. KG. I mean, you played in an era that you were kind of, Ryan, in the era where it was the end of that old school era that we talked about, of course, the 90s, early 2000s, and really the big, you played into the beginning of the current era. You played against the Splash Brothers, so you got to see kind of both, and that's a rare thing to kind of see the end of the what I call the OG era, and then now the new school era, and you were smack dab right in the middle of both of those.
Well, that's what makes me a great analyst.
Yep, seriously,
I
yeah.
was
'Cause I
able to
mean,
see
yeah,
it.
and you grew up watching the era that we talk, the '90s, all that era, but you understand that, but you obviously a commentator now, and you understand the game now, so it's a perfect blend, and it's fun to watch how the game progress. It really has. I enjoy all eras of the NBA, and I love watching it now, but I also appreciate where we came from back in the '70s, '80s, '90s to now, and how we got here. So
Yes.
it's fascinating to me, and I have a couple more questions for you. Who the most underrated player you ever played against? Who most people maybe don't know about or don't talk about, and you're like, that guy was really good.
Dang. Most underrated player that I played against. Um, Let me think. And I had to play against this guy. Underrated. Um, I think if Adam Morrison didn't blow out his ACL, people don't realize he had that it factor. People don't give AM that much credit. He had the it factor. He would have come along, but he tore his knee up. He didn't know how to rehab the right way. He didn't kind of come back. But he had the it, and I don't think a lot of people realize he had that like kind of like trash talking Larry Bird, high release, could get it off the bounce. Like
Wow.
he just didn't have the right opportunities, and we got hurt. I think that was tough. Sean May was cold. Big as Sean
Yeah,
May
Sean
was,
May,
he could
North
play.
Carolina. Yep.
Sean could play the three. He could handle it. He could shoot a three. Smooth game, man. Get in the game in the lane, shoot that righty floater up. I don't think Sean May got his just due because of those injuries. Um, I'm trying to think too. Who else was tough? I think Jamal Crawford's getting his flowers now that he's is an analyst and getting shouted out more. I think in today's NBA, Mike Conley easily the most underrated for what he's done, and even probably a career you'll look back at and be like, "Dang, that dude was always really good, and he always did his job, and he played the right way." You know, Mike Conley definitely in that underrated category. Only one All Star nod. I want something. Was it one or maybe two? I can't remember exactly, but I think Mike definitely
That's a
is one that you're gonna look back on.
that's a great one right there. Yeah, I forget about Conley. Yeah, I love him. I'm a Ohio State guy, so I love Mike Conley.
Hmm. As far as a guy, underrated. I gotta think. I'll get back to you with some more names, but there's a
Morrison's
couple guys that were cold.
Morrison's another one. I forgot about Adam Morrison. He in college, he was unbelievable, and it was sad to see that his career didn't pan out how we thought it could have. Because I mean, he was kind of ahead of his time. A shooter, like you said, he could shoot how he did. He's almost like a Dirk in
Yes.
some ways. The way he could shoot, how tall he was, lanky. He had that attitude. Like I forgot about Adam Morrison. He was a heck of a player. I mean, he would.
We didn't have the player development
Mm.
based around him that we do now to help him become what he needed to be.
Because he was really a prototype before his time. I mean, that was 20 years ago when I forgot about that. And Adam Morrison, wow, that's a great name job right there.
I think we know Brandon Roy. People
Oh God,
respect Brandon Roy,
love
right?
Brandon Roy.
It's pretty universal.
Yep.
Um,
But you're right.
Gosh,
He doesn't always get the credit he deserves either. He was people don't realize how great of a player Brandon before his injuries. I mean, if Odin and him don't get injured with LaMarcus, like and Batum and those guys, man, they're winning a championship in
yeah,
my opinion.
Greg was tough. Greg was tough. Ooh, man. If his body could have held
Oh
up, oh
God.
gosh.
Did you ever see their record together when Aldridge, Odom and Brandon Roy played together? They were like, I don't know the exact record. It was like 52-14 or some crazy record. And it's like, I mean, I would have. They only
Golly.
played that many games together. It was like not even a season of games together, the three of them. But when they were on the court together, they were tough to beat. I mean, that was talk about three talented guys.
Joe Johnson, you could
Oh
probably
yeah,
throw in that category. ISO Joe, if the Suns had kept him, you probably would have been looking at a championship or two. Man, who else am I thinking about, man? Um, there's a couple of guys. There's a couple of guys. I can't. You come back to me later. I think I have a longer underrated list.
that's. I'm sure that's one you could think about for days because there's so many guys that you play against. You probably, there's so many guys in the NBA that people don't realize how good they really are because they just look at stats and think, oh, they only average this many points, so they can't be that good. It doesn't work that way. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why a guy might not average 20 points. So I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of guys in the NBA like that. I had one of the guys I feel in the 90s, and he was very well respected in the 90s, but people nowadays really rave about him, and that's Anthony Mason. I had his son on the show, and he played for the Knicks,
Ooh.
obviously, and he exactly. But back then, people didn't realize he was kind of the first, like one of the first point forwards with Scotty. Like that would mean he would,
Yes.
for his size to be a point forward. He had to be what 280 or two. He was massive, and taking the ball on the court, and he can move how he could. That was way before his time. Nowadays, a lot of people can do it, but back then, his son was telling me my dad was one of the first of his kind. Him and Scotty really were, 2 point or two really small forwards taking the ball up the court like that and
I'll
passing the
give you
ball.
another name, Andre Blatch.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Andre Blatch. Completely. Wow.
Ray was a 7-footer with a real life handle, like a guard.
Wow.
Great,
Forgot
extremely underrated.
Andre Blatch. I haven't heard that name in years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is something we could talk about for hours because there's a lot of these kind of guys. I love
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Dre had everything.
Wow, Andre Blatch. God, that name is again that's fun. Bring me back now. And what about you know after basketball, after you retired and getting in the commentary, having your podcast, of course. I think it was you and Brandon Haywood. Like get into a little bit of that and how did that all begin? And the commentary for the Rockets. Like how did you get into that?
I always, when I was playing halfway through, I'd always take the courses through the NBA and the NBPA. Right. So real estate, tech, coaching, everything. I went to everything. So I figured out what would stick. And broadcasting just lit up for me. It was a challenge. I felt like it was something I want to compete with. I want to be good. And while I was playing, I worked towards broadcasting. I would go work out in the gym, then I'd go do 4 hours of radio, so I could grow and be good at it. And I was always told get the reps while you're a player because they ain't gonna answer that phone call when you ain't playing no more. It ain't gonna be the same. Okay, they want a current player on. So while you're willing to do those things, they'll reach out. And I bugged people and bugged them, and I heard no. I heard no so many times. I thought it was my name. I thought my name was no because that's how many times they kept telling me when I would ask things. And I worked towards it. Got my first opportunities on ESPN radio. Went from radio, got to do some TV hits, and like I came like I don't I come into that Brad. I come into this like broadcast game like a prime Mike Tyson. I come in there I'm sweating. I got a game plan. Like I'm coming in for some mental warfare, Brad. I wasn't coming in for some regular stuff. I was there to make waves and kind of put in work. And I kind of learned the craft. I worked at it. I came in with the mindset that I wasn't good, that I needed to get good, that I had to figure it out, and that I didn't have an excuse not to figure it out. So I'd study hours of film of guys broadcasting live and see what I needed to do until I kind of learned it and figured it out. And I just watched people and I'd study them and I'd bug them and ask them to sit down and talk with me and teach me. And I'd bug them again and say, let's go to lunch, let's do something with all these people so I could figure out where they were and just stayed on top of them. And really try to get in the lane. And I'm so appreciative of the Houston Rockets, full circle from I've done college basketball, ESPN, Turner, Fox, anything you can name. Shout out Skip Bayless, still has never had me on his show. That's one guy that sticks with me. Skip Bayless, you hear this, you owe me interview something or sit down or a segment, a debate, whatever, however you want it. um, I have a hit list. Like I had to get on, like obsessed. Like, hey, I have to get on this. This is what what I'm saying. I would go to first take and I would sit in the control room and be like, what I need to do to be on the show. Tell me what I need to do. Why can't I be on the show? What's my lane? I watched the show. It was in depth. What I needed to be on the show. You tell me what needs to be done. I would critique the show. I would learn how the producers think, learn what they want. I would ask all these questions just to get my opportunity to be on. Um, and coming back after off that, and I'm so thankful for that opportunity, by the way. But when it came to the Rockets, when they kind of had reached out and I interviewed for the job, it was the first time in my career, basketball, anything, where I was given a home. Felt like even my whole NBA career, I was part of a core, then it didn't work, and it didn't have these chances. But I felt like this is the first time that I was the guy, that a privilege was given to me. So I appreciate the Fertitta family, the Houston Rockets, everybody who's giving me that shot, man. It's the first time somebody believed in me, dude. Like gave me a shot. Like, we'll experiment with him. Like, nah, this is your home. So I'm grateful for it. It gets my itch out where I get to travel, be around the game, and fraternize. And Brad, I'm sure it'd be a dream for you coming down and like talking to all the former players that are coaches and the coaches that are there that used to play, and then the young guys in the mix. So I get to see it all, man. So I'm beyond blessed for it. But I'm having a blast, dude. You know, it ain't work.
I get to tell how you talk about it. You could feel the energy and the passion you have for it, and you can't fake that. I always tell people, and I tell my nephews, I say you can't fake energy. You can fake a lot of things in life, but you can't fake that, and you can just feel when someone has that kind of energy. So I think it's awesome how you, I mean, just your whole career. I mean, not knowing your struggles you had at UCLA, and then everything you did through your NBA career now, and as a commentator and having to work your ass off to get there, like that says a lot about you. And I think you could tell you're grateful for where you are in your life, and a lot of people aren't. I mean, there's so many people who don't realize, how good they have it or where they are in their life, and they kind of take things for granted. You don't, and I think that's probably, I think maybe some of the reason you went through some of the stuff you did in your life, especially in college, is to give you that perspective now. Now that you're a little bit older, you can kind of look back and say, okay, now I'm grateful I have all I have.
Yeah, no, 100%. And for me, it was I appreciate your compliment, by the way. Thanks, Brad. Being emotionally invested every day, even the days that you don't feel like it. And it's tough because it brings energy on what I do. But like when I come to work and it's happens far before I even get on air. How you doing? How's your day doing? I'm happy to be here. When we're talking, I believe in what I'm talking about. In the middle of summer, when you're doing radio and you got to talk about baseball for 2 or 4 hours and do your research there, how much do you love radio? How much do you love broadcasting? How many ball players are willing to just sit down and do 4 hours of radio? And I went at that sucker like practice. 'Cause I want to be good. So, Brad, my mindset was like, how can I get you to listen to me for 4 hours when you can't see me? You see me, I can sing and dance and run and move, and I got all these pretty girls. Can my voice hold on to you and be so captivating that you'll listen to me for 4 straight hours and then want to come back and hear and argue and laugh and just smile and cry and all those things? Because if I don't make you feel I'm not doing my job, so on that side, I make you feel. This side, I lay out and let these kids do what they do and try to enhance their opportunities. But these are a lot of things that I had to learn in the game. So you had to feel me. You had to see me. You had to know I was there. You had to go, ah, God, I can't stand Ryan Hollins, bro. I love that girl. Like, dang, he made a good point. Like I'm obsessive about it. On this side. So I'm blessed, man. But I know I put in the work because I was like, I can't be told no. Like I can't be told no. Like I need to come out that thing. And I told kid I was working out the other day. Said, you wondering if you're a Division 1 ball player. When they walk in the gym, brother, he's D1. Where's he going to school? When they walk, when they get the ball in their hands, when they do something, any sport. You look at high school kids, oh no, that's a Division 1 kid right there. Nah, he looked different, dude. He different. Or you saw LeBron in high school, you're like, nah, he different. You see him. So for me in broadcasting, I had to come in there and be different. That was my goal. That was something that I had to do. I had to lead. There shouldn't have been any questions on what I needed to do, and I messed up several times, obviously. But to go back, humble myself, and get better, and say, "Hey, what did I mess up on? Let me get better. What do I need to grow on?" Because Brad, I can be too excited many times, but
That
that's a good problem.
I was gonna say that 100%. Like we had an announcer here in Cleveland named Joe Tate, iconic Cavs radio announcer for like 30 years. Everyone in Cleveland loves him. He passed away several years ago, but he was an announcer for about 30 some years. And I remember as a kid, my dad would sometimes turn down the volume of the TV. We'd be watching the game on TV, the Cavs game. He'd turn on the volume and he turned Joe Tate up. That's how great Joe Tate was. And we listened to him, and he would paint the vision. I mean, you wouldn't even have to watch the game to see the vision he was painting. He would talk about, over the timeline into the forecourt, passing here, price to Elo. Da, da, da. And it was just incredible. And like I remember as a little kid, that I already had a passion for basketball, but then listening to Joe, it just like it enhanced your experience as a Cavs fan. So I feel like that it's such a, I think commentary is such an underrated part of the game. Like you said, people, yeah, it's easy to just watch a game and see what's going, but to actually have that the commentary enhances the game and it gives you a different perspective, especially radio commentary. It gives you a completely different perspective. So if you can bring that energy and that vibe, I'm telling you, for me as a child, some of my best childhood memories are listening to Joe Tate, call the Cavs. And a
Wow.
lot of people my age in Cleveland would say the same thing.
Wow, that's cool.
Yep. Yeah, he was
Well, I pray I
iconic.
have that pray I have that career and impact and you know, like I said, it's for me, it's not about me, it's about those young guys on the court putting in the work,
You have the
and
right
enhancing those moments.
you have the right perspective. I could just tell by talking to you. So that's why it will happen that way, because you have the right perspective, you have the right energy, and you're passionate about it. It's not just a job for you. So some people it's just a job, but for you, I could just tell by talking to you, it's not. And that goes. I think in any aspect of life that goes a long, long way. And you can tell right away. Like you said, telling about the D1 athletes when you see them, you can also tell when someone has a passion for what they do when you see them. Just how they talk about it, they're excited. I mean, I can just tell by talking to you. Not only do you know a lot about the NBA, but you know a lot about the history of the NBA, and you know a lot about the current NBA. It's not, you have all the bases covered. So, and you played major college basketball, you played a national championship game, you played for great teams in the NBA. So you kind of have that well-rounded view, and you're very down to earth. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of cool NBA players over the years, but I mean, you have that down to earth personality, and that goes a long way to a casual fan who might not know a lot about you personally. That goes a long way because they instantly think that
Well,
guy's pretty
appreciate it,
cool.
Brad.
100%. Yep. So one last question for you, and I ask this to every guest, and I always love hearing the answer. When you look back 30, 40 years from now, you're sitting on some beach, retired somewhere, looking back at your career. What do you want people to know about the legacy of Ryan Hollins?
I want people to know that Ryan was a hard worker, not just a hard worker, as we just talked about earlier, like he loved the game. He sacrificed it. Like you got blood, sweat, and tears. He got up every day to work. He sacrificed himself for his teammates. Maybe he could have been more. He could have been a little bit more selfish, but he worked to play the game the right way. And his passion was there. It caused a lot of sleepless nights. The work, was clearly there every hour of the day. But a true hoop head, a true nerd, a true student of the game, and that skinny kid from Pasadena was privileged to be there and an overachiever. I wasn't on no mock draft boards. My daddy didn't play ball. I didn't have a hoop bloodline. I didn't go to some powerhouse school. Like, know that like Ryan Hollins is closer to you than he would be to those, you know, mega stars that you saw on the basketball court. I came from nowhere. You know what I'm saying? So it was the guy fighting and scratching that blue collar everyday guy. So I hope that people see that from Ryan Hollins because they kind of see a tall guy and they just, oh, he's just out there. He just will be there. Like, nah, bro, I come from the hood. I grew up on the playgrounds. Like I came from humble beginnings and I'm fortunate to be there, but I hope that I'm graded on that scale rather than, other scales.
Man, you got the right attitude. I can tell you that much. And that's a great answer. Yeah, I mean, I think having that down to earth attitude and coming from where you came from, and you said I'm more like the average man than I am, the mega stars in the NBA. So that again, that's a story a lot of people can relate to, because a lot of people can't relate to the LeBrons who's just so naturally different and gifted, and and not that he didn't work his ass off, but he was just
100%.
different. He was different from the beginning. Not everyone can relate to someone like that. They can relate to someone like Ryan Hollins who worked to where he got to. And yes, you had some ability and talent, but you had to take that to the next level to get to where you got to, and you did that. So, and you did it in multiple areas of your life, not just basketball, but now commentary and different areas like that. That's a huge, win for you. And I think it's a journey, or it's a story that you could tell a lot of people to inspire, some of the younger generation coming up who might be struggling.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. I always just try to give back those lessons and it's funny, people, I'm no more from my broadcasting than the court. So I'm glad I'm like I'm the all-star on this side, right? I'm top 10 on this side, right? Okay. I didn't have a career, but um I uh I enjoy it, man. And I think sometimes people see my broadcast clips or a debate show or something like that. "Eh, this guy's this gives it. Nah, man, I got respect for the game. I love the game. Don't fall into a 30-second clip. I'm a hoop head, man, like a for real, hooper, and I like to believe that I did right by the game.
No, you definitely did. And after talking to you, I didn't realize how much. I mean, I knew you were knowledgeable, but man, you're very knowledgeable. You know a lot, especially about the history. So I'm very impressed. And I can tell you, like, I'm excited for this podcast to drop because a lot of the people who watch it are the '90s fans and some of the OGs, so they'll be able to appreciate this as well. So definitely appreciate you coming on the show, man. It was great to meet you down in Orlando. I really thank you for taking the time to come on tonight. I know it's a night that you probably want to get to bed. So again, thank you for doing this. I'll definitely be in touch. I'll drop you a line on IG. And again, man, I can't thank you, Ryan, enough for coming on the show.
Brad, anytime, you know it, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it, man.